You need to understand that when distance enters a relationship, people often assume it means the connection is weak, that it means something has broken beyond repair, that it means two people were never truly meant to be together. But the truth is far more complicated and far more emotional than that. Distance does not always destroy love. Sometimes distance exposes it. Sometimes distance forces two people to face the truth of what they feel, the truth of what they fear, and the truth of whether they are willing to grow for the person standing in front of them. When you love someone who has avoidant tendencies, the experience can feel confusing in a way that touches your deepest emotions. One moment they seem present, warm, and close, and the next moment they seem distant, quiet, almost unreachable. You start asking yourself questions that slowly begin to weigh on your heart. You wonder if you did something wrong, if you asked for too much, if your need for reassurance somehow pushed them away. You replay conversations in your mind late at night, trying to understand the moment things shifted, trying to figure out how something that felt so real could suddenly feel so fragile. The reason this hurts so deeply is because your heart recognizes the connection. Your heart remembers the laughter, the moments of honesty, the times when they looked at you in a way that felt genuine and real. You saw a side of them that not many people see, a softer side, a side capable of affection and vulnerability. And because you saw that side, you believed the relationship had the potential to grow into something stable, something safe, something lasting. But you need to understand something that many people realize too late. Loving someone who struggles with closeness often means witnessing a quiet battle inside them. A part of them longs for the connection they feel with you, the warmth of your presence, the comfort of knowing someone truly understands them. Yet another part of them becomes afraid the moment that connection begins to feel real. Closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability requires courage. For someone who has spent their life protecting themselves emotionally, that courage can feel overwhelming. So they create distance, not always because they want to lose you, but because they are trying to manage emotions. They do not fully understand themselves. They step back when things start to feel serious. They become quiet when feelings deepen. They convince themselves they need space, even when a part of them knows they care. And for the person who loves them, this pattern can feel like standing in a storm without knowing which direction the wind will blow next. You keep hoping the distance is temporary, that patience will eventually create safety for them, that if you remain kind and understanding long enough, they will stop running from what they feel. Your heart tells you that real love requires compassion, so you try to give them the benefit of the doubt again and again. You soften your words when you feel hurt, you reassure them when they seem uncertain, you try to show them through your actions that love does not have to be frightening. But there comes a moment when something inside you begins to shift. It is not anger. It is not resentment. It is a quiet awakening that arrives after you have given your heart for so long without feeling the same consistency in return. You start realizing that love cannot survive on one person's effort alone. Love cannot grow if only one heart is brave enough to stay present. And this is the moment where distance begins to reveal the truth. When you finally stop chasing someone who keeps stepping back, the dynamic changes in a way that can surprise both of you. The space that once felt filled by your patience and your effort becomes silent. The person who was used to you reaching out, explaining your feelings, trying to repair the connection, suddenly notices something different. Your energy changes. You are no longer trying to convince them to stay. You are no longer bending your needs just to make the relationship easier for them to handle. You are simply standing in your truth, acknowledging that your heart deserves consistency, clarity, and care. This is where the true nature of the relationship begins to appear. If the connection existed only because you were the one constantly holding it together, then the silence will remain. The distance will stretch further until it eventually becomes an ending. And painful as that may feel, it brings a certain clarity that protects your heart from continuing in a cycle that was never balanced. But if the connection was real for both of you, something different begins to happen. The absence of your pursuit forces them to confront emotions they were previously able to avoid. Without the comfort of knowing you will always reach out first, they begin to feel the weight of losing someone who genuinely cared for them. They start reflecting on what the relationship meant. They begin remembering the way you supported them, the way you understood them, the way you offered them something deeper than casual affection. The quiet space you created becomes a mirror they cannot easily ignore. And sometimes that mirror leads to growth. Not instant transformation, not perfect behavior overnight, but small moments of courage that begin to replace the old pattern of avoidance. They may reach out in ways that feel different, more intentional, more sincere. They may begin to realize that closeness does not have to mean losing themselves, that vulnerability does not have to mean weakness. When two people are truly meant to build something meaningful together, distance becomes a turning point rather than an ending. It becomes the moment where both hearts are forced to grow in different ways. One learns the strength of self-respect, the other learns the courage of emotional presence. That is the quiet truth many people do not talk about. Destiny in love is not proven by constant closeness without struggle. Destiny is revealed in the moments when fear appears and both people choose to move through it instead of running away from it. And when that happens, when two people finally meet each other with equal effort, equal honesty, and equal willingness to grow, the relationship transforms into something deeper than the connection that first brought them together. It becomes a partnership built not only on attraction, but on maturity, understanding, and the shared decision to stop running from what the heart has always known. You need to understand that one of the most powerful moments in any relationship does not happen when two people are chasing each other. It happens when one person finally stops chasing. It happens in the quiet moment when your heart, after trying for so long, realizes that love cannot survive if it is carried by only one set of shoulders. That moment is not loud, it is not dramatic, and it is not filled with anger. It is a calm realization that slowly settles inside you, the realization that your love deserves to be met, not constantly pursued. For a long time, you may have believed that patience was the answer. You believed that if you stayed kind enough, understanding enough, supportive enough, the person you cared about would eventually feel safe enough to stay close. You told yourself that everyone has fears, everyone has wounds, and love sometimes requires waiting for someone to grow through those fears. So you kept showing up with an open heart. You listened when they spoke about their struggles, you comforted them when they seemed uncertain, and you tried to be the kind of person who made love feel safe rather than demanding. But loving someone who has avoidant tendencies often places you in a painful position without you realizing it at first. You become the one who reaches out when silence appears. You become the one who tries to repair the connection when distance grows. You become the one who reassures them that everything is okay, even when your own heart is quietly hurting. Over time, you begin carrying the emotional weight of the relationship because you believe that if you stop trying, everything might fall apart. What makes this dynamic so exhausting is that it slowly trains your mind to believe that the relationship only survives because of your effort. You begin measuring every moment of closeness against the fear that it might disappear again. When they seem warm and affectionate, you feel relief. When they become distant, you feel anxiety. Your emotional world starts revolving around their presence and absence, and you do not even notice how much of yourself you are losing in the process. This is why the moment you stop chasing is so powerful, not because you are trying to punish them and not because you suddenly stopped caring. It happens because you reach a point where your heart cannot keep running after someone who keeps stepping away. You realize that love should not feel like a constant race where one person is always trying to catch up. When that realization arrives, something inside you becomes still. You no longer feel the need to send another message explaining how you feel. You no longer feel the urge to fill the silence with your words. You simply step back and allow the space to exist without trying to control it. For someone who is used to emotional distance, this change can feel shocking in a way they did not expect. They were familiar with the old pattern, where their silence would eventually be followed by your effort. They were used to knowing that if they pulled away, you would reach forward again to reconnect. That pattern allowed them to keep their distance without ever fully losing the relationship. But when you stop chasing, the pattern breaks. The quiet becomes real in a way it was not before. They can no longer rely on the certainty that you will always return to restore the connection. And in that moment, they begin to experience something they had been avoiding for a long time: the possibility of truly losing you. This is the moment where an avoidant person often begins to reflect in ways they never did before. Without the constant reassurance of your presence, they start remembering the role you played in their life. They remember the conversations that made them feel understood, the laughter you shared, the emotional safety you tried to offer them even when they struggled to accept it. The absence of your pursuit forces them to sit with their own feelings instead of escaping them. They begin asking themselves questions they once avoided. They begin wondering why the silence feels heavier now than it ever did before. For some avoidant individuals, this moment becomes a turning point. It creates an awareness that closeness does not disappear simply because they step away. Instead, it shows them that the connection they had with you required care and effort from both sides. Without your constant pursuit, they begin to realize that relationships cannot survive on distance alone. If there was something genuine between you, this realization can slowly awaken a desire to grow. They may begin to approach the connection differently, not with the same pattern of stepping back whenever things feel intense, but with a willingness to remain present even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. Growth like this rarely happens quickly. It is often uncertain and gradual, filled with small steps rather than dramatic changes. But those small steps reveal something important. They reveal that the person who once avoided emotional closeness is beginning to understand its value. At the same time, something important is happening within you as well. By stepping back from the constant pursuit, you rediscover a part of yourself that had been overshadowed by the effort to maintain the relationship. You begin reconnecting with your own sense of peace. You start realizing that your worth was never meant to be measured by someone else's ability to stay present. Your heart becomes stronger, not because it has stopped loving, but because it has learned that love must be mutual to truly thrive. You begin understanding that your kindness and patience are meaningful qualities, but they should never require you to abandon your own emotional needs. And this is where the real transformation occurs. If the connection between you and that person was meant to grow into something lasting, it will only happen when both of you reach this place of awareness. One learns to stop running from closeness, and the other learns to stop chasing someone who cannot yet stand still. When those two lessons meet, something powerful becomes possible. The relationship can begin again from a place of balance rather than imbalance. It can grow through honest effort rather than emotional pursuit. But even if that reunion never happens, the moment you stop chasing still carries an important gift. It reminds you that love should never require you to lose yourself in order to keep someone else close. Your heart deserves someone who chooses to stay, someone who meets your effort with their own, someone who understands that real connection is built when two people walk toward each other instead of one person running while the other follows behind. You need to understand that love does not truly prove itself in the easy moments. Anyone can stay when everything feels comfortable, when there is no pressure, when emotions are light and uncomplicated. But the real test of a connection happens when fear appears, when uncertainty enters the relationship, and when both people are forced to decide whether they will grow or retreat. This is especially true when you are loving someone who struggles with closeness. Someone who feels the warmth of connection yet instinctively pulls away from it. At the beginning, relationships like this often feel incredibly intense and meaningful. There are moments of deep conversation, moments where you feel seen and understood in a way that feels rare. They may open up to you about things they rarely share with anyone else. In those moments, you feel a closeness that convinces you something special is happening. You believe that what you are building together has the potential to become something stable and lasting. But then, something changes. The deeper the connection becomes, the more their fear begins to surface. They may start creating distance, sometimes without even realizing why. Conversations become shorter. Their presence becomes less certain. You may feel them pulling away just when you thought things were moving forward. And this is where your heart begins to struggle, because you remember the version of them who was open and close to you. You remember the warmth in their voice, the honesty in their words, the way they made you feel important in those earlier moments. So when they begin to withdraw, your instinct is not to walk away. Your instinct is to hold on tighter. You try to understand them. You tell yourself they are simply overwhelmed. You tell yourself they need time, patience, reassurance. So you stay kind. You stay supportive. You keep giving your effort because you believe the connection deserves that level of commitment. But slowly, quietly, something else begins to happen inside you. The imbalance starts to feel heavier. You notice that you are the one initiating most of the conversations. You notice that you are the one trying to repair the connection whenever it weakens. You notice how often you are adjusting your expectations just to keep things peaceful. Your heart begins asking a painful question. Why am I the only one fighting this hard to keep us together? That question can take time to fully form, because when you love someone deeply, your instinct is always to protect the relationship rather than question it. But eventually, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Real love cannot be sustained by one person's effort alone. This realization is one of the most emotional turning points in any relationship. It is the moment where you begin understanding that destiny between two people is not defined by attraction or chemistry alone. It is defined by whether both individuals are willing to grow enough to meet each other in the middle. Growth is not easy, especially for someone who has spent their life protecting themselves from vulnerability. For an avoidant person, closeness can feel like standing at the edge of something unknown. It requires them to face emotions they may have learned to suppress for years. It requires them to admit that connection matters more than the comfort of distance. And that is why growth becomes the true measure of love. If someone truly values the connection they have with you, there will eventually come a moment where they realize that their fear is costing them something meaningful. They begin to see that avoiding vulnerability might protect them temporarily, but it also prevents them from experiencing the depth of love that exists between two people who choose each other fully. When that realization begins to form, it can change everything. The person who once pulled away may begin making small but meaningful efforts to stay present. They may try to communicate more honestly. They may begin confronting their own fears rather than running from them. These changes may not be dramatic at first. Growth often appears in quiet ways. It appears in the effort to have difficult conversations. It appears in the willingness to show consistency. It appears in the courage to remain emotionally available, even when vulnerability feels uncomfortable. At the same time, your own growth becomes just as important. Loving someone who struggles with closeness teaches you lessons about your own boundaries and your own self-worth. You begin learning that caring deeply about someone does not mean sacrificing your emotional well-being. You begin recognizing that patience must be balanced with self-respect. Compassion must be balanced with clarity. You learn that it is possible to love someone while also standing firmly in the belief that you deserve consistency, honesty, and genuine effort. When both people reach this point of growth, something remarkable becomes possible. The relationship is no longer built on chasing and withdrawing. Instead, it becomes a space where two individuals are consciously choosing to move toward each other despite their fears. This is what true destiny in love looks like. It is not the absence of struggle, and it is not a perfect story where everything unfolds effortlessly. Destiny is revealed when two people face the challenges of their connection and decide that the relationship is worth the courage it requires. But you must also understand something equally important. Growth cannot be forced. You cannot make someone confront their fears before they are ready. You cannot convince someone to value the relationship if they are not willing to do the emotional work required to sustain it. And that is why your own growth matters so deeply. When you stop trying to control the outcome of the relationship, you create space for the truth to emerge. Either the other person rises to meet you with effort and maturity, or the distance between you becomes a sign that the connection was never meant to grow in the way you hoped. Both outcomes carry a lesson that strengthens your heart. If they grow and return with genuine effort, the relationship has the opportunity to become healthier and more balanced than before. If they do not, you walk away with the knowledge that you honored your own worth rather than remaining trapped in a cycle that slowly drained your spirit. You need to understand that love is not proven by how much pain you are willing to tolerate. Love is proven by how much both people are willing to grow for the sake of the connection they share. When two individuals reach that place of mutual courage, the relationship becomes something far deeper than the uncertainty that once surrounded it. And in that moment, love finally becomes what it was always meant to be. A partnership where two hearts choose each other not only when it feels easy, but also when it requires them to become stronger, braver, and more emotionally present than they have ever been before.